Hello everyone and welcome back to Very Cold Lasagna, your filthy casual place for all the filthy casual takes on the world of pro wrestling and sports. I'm your host, DylanLasagna, and welcome to another weekly preview and another round of picks for the 2022 NFL season. And by this point, we reached the quarter point of the season, and that is of course week 5. And while it's clear that we know which teams are pretty crappy and ready to get that elusive pick in the 2023 NFL draft, there's still plenty of teams that are still trying to aim for those playoff spots in January, and well, that even includes some delusional teams. So with that being said, let's get into the game slate that is ahead this coming weekend and get into our picks for this week, even though I'm going to get most of them wrong again. I mean, what else is new in the world of the NFL at this point? So starting things off on Thursday Night Football, only on Amazon Prime. Gee, I hope all of you that paid for Prime Video for $15 a month are getting your money's worth with this game and all the other games we've been getting so far, aside from the very first one. Yeah, this was an absolute embarrassment. This was disgusting. This was ugly. I say even uglier than the Sunday Night Football game we got a couple weeks ago. Yeah, the Indianapolis Colts and the Denver Broncos put on an absolute shitfest. Like, turnovers. Like, Matt Ryan and Russell Wilson couldn't do jack shit. Like, these were two quarterbacks that were doing wonders years ago, and now they can't even read the field. They couldn't even get rid of the ball. They were just holding it on for dear life with the ball and taking sacks, turning the ball over. And especially Russell Wilson. They're paying this man over $250 million. And he's still making that Super Bowl mistake from years ago. And throwing it at not even in the goal line anymore. He's throwing interceptions in the end zone now. So anyway, they have this ugly ass game that's not even worth $9 or $10 on Amazon Prime Video. You shouldn't even watch this game for free on Twitch. I'm just saying now, this game was free on Twitch. Okay, you shouldn't have wasted your time with this game and with any of the other games coming up aside until I say week 9 or whenever the next worthy game is on Prime Video or Twitch. Because this 12-9 stinker that the Indianapolis Colts won was absolutely embarrassing. This sucked. I even fell asleep during most of the overtime period. That's how bad this game was. This was so bad. Like, you could say, oh, they were just playing defense. No, the offenses sucked. They absolutely sucked. They even put me to sleep. That's how bad this game was. But anyway, I digress. The Indianapolis Colts beat the Denver Broncos 12-9. Matt Ryan, I guess, led his offense to very, very critical field goals. And man, at this point, Russell Wilson, something's not working. Something's not working in Denver. Something's not working there. For a team that had Super Bowl aspirations, it's absolutely not working. Then we get to the Sunday slate of games. Back in London, mate. The New York Giants take on the Green Bay Packers. The Giants riding that wave of Saquon Barkley to win last week over the Chicago Bears. The Packers somehow in an overtime game with the Patriots, but they won anyway, 27-24. So, I mean, the Giants, they're becoming a Saquon-centered offense because, well, Daniel Jones is an inconsistent mess, even with Brian Daboll as his head coach now. Meanwhile, for Aaron Rodgers and the Packers, their top thing going on right now is that, you know, Romeo Doubs and Christian Watson are very slowly coming along. I mean, they had a good day against the Patriots, but they still had their rookie moments. But still, just like with the Patriots, you kind of don't want to overlook this game against the Giants. So I'm still picking the Packers to win this game, but just don't overlook your opponents, or else you're going to end up in a situation like you were against the Patriots. Next up, we have the Pittsburgh Steelers taking on the Buffalo Bills. Last week for these teams, Mike Tomlin finally crossed the picket line Put in Kenny Pickett, but wasn't enough to beat the returning Zach Wilson and the New York Jets as they lost to them. Meanwhile, for Josh Allen and the Bills, they roared back from a 20-point deficit in the rain to score a big win over the Baltimore Ravens, 23-20. So Kenny Pickett is making his first start, but man, what a bad time to make him start this game. I mean, I guess you get some valuable experience, I guess, against one of the premier teams and against one of the premier quarterbacks in Josh Allen, but yikes. Yikes. I hope Kenny Pickett's ready to showcase his skills. But anyway, meanwhile for the Bills, there's some injuries to keep note of. Isaiah McKenzie and Dawson Knox on the receiving end. So whether or not they're out on Sunday, Josh Allen's complement of weapons, something to keep an eye on. So I'm going with the Bills to win this game on Sunday. So just keep an eye on that injury list for Buffalo. Next up, we have the LA Chargers taking on the Cleveland Browns. Last week, the Chargers exacted some revenge on the Houston Texans, beating them 34-24. And meanwhile, for the Browns, not a good day in the offense for Jacoby Brissett. He struggled pretty much all day with decision-making as they lost to the Falcons. And then the Chargers, they continue to, they seem pretty solid. Even though it's just the Texans, they continue to, try to find some footing without Joey Bosa in the pass rush. I mean, they still got Khalil Mack there. And then on offense, I mean, Austin Eckler's trying to chug along while Justin Herbert continues to nurse that rib injury. Meanwhile, for the Browns, they didn't have Myles Garrett in that game against Atlanta. They also didn't have Jadeveon Clowney, so do they get them back in this game against a Chargers team that's still reeling with injuries? If they do, they may have a chance. But if they don't, they're probably going to get their ass whooped. So I'm picking the Chargers to win this game, but don't be surprised if they try to clipper it up. So the Houston Texans traveled to Jacksonville to take on the all-elite Jaguars, sponsored by All Elite Wrestling. So the Davis Mills and the Texans pretty much struggled on Sunday against the Chargers, and they lost that game. So for the Jaguars, though, they jumped out to this early 14-0 lead against the Philadelphia Eagles, but 5 fumbles by Trevor Lawrence was a difference maker for them. And then they lost that game to the Eagles, and as they came back from that game. So for the Texans, not promising signs, not encouraging ones for their quarterback Davis Mills. At some point, I don't know if they're going to consider benching Davis Mills for Kyle Allen, but I mean, Davis Mills hasn't really, even with the supporting cast, the lack thereof without him. It's you have to wonder if there is a point where you just put in Kyle Allen because you think Davis Mills is not the guy. Meanwhile, for the Jacksonville Jaguars, they're just looking back at this loss to the Eagles as a learning lesson for them. Trevor Lawrence learning to take care of the football, the pass rush, going after Jalen Hurts, and applying that to Davis Mills. The Jags team looking for a bounce back on Sunday against their division rival. So give me the Jaguars in this game against the Texans. The Chicago Bears take on the Minnesota Vikings. For the Bears last Sunday against the New York Giants, same old story, some Bears football. As Justin Fields and the Bears offense, they looked a little more flashy, but they couldn't finish drives, leading to a kind of ugly loss to the big blue Giants. Meanwhile, for the Vikings, they somewhat cooked a little late in the game against the Saints in London, and they lucked out. They literally lucked out from a double doink to hold on and survive 28-25. So for the Bears, there's a lot of blame going around for Justin Fields. and him struggling with his reads, with his progression in his second year. I mean, yeah, Justin Fields does have his faults, but at the same time, his offensive coordinator is, I think it's Luke Getsy, I believe. He's not really helping. He's not really helping things either. So he has to let him throw. He has to give him a better game plan. He has to give him better adjustments. Otherwise, there's nothing really much else to do. Meanwhile, for the Minnesota Vikings, I think what you need to do going to this game against a pretty bad Bears team is you got to work on consistency. Like you've had issues where the offense starts slow, like you did against the Lions a couple of weeks ago, or you start off hot, like you did against the Packers in the first week, and then you get colder, or vice versa. This is a solid team for the Vikings, but consistency would be something that you got to work on. So I do go with the Vikings in this game, but don't be surprised if they fumble the bag. Next up, we have the Detroit Lions going up against the New England Patriots. The Lions, tried to make this a game, tried to make this a shootout. I mean, the offense really wasn't to blame in this one, but because the Detroit defense couldn't stop Seattle from scoring. And for the Lions, they couldn't complete the comeback, and they lost a very close game that ended up being the shootout. Meanwhile, for the Patriots, they lost their backup too, Brian Hoyer. And yet somehow their third stringer, Bailey Zappi, that's his name, and their defense made Aaron Rodgers sweat. They made the Packers sweat and took it all the way down to overtime, even though they lost 24-27. So still, to do that against Aaron Rodgers and the Packers, like, damn, okay. But, they're 1-3 for a reason. So either way, like, who starts between Brian Hoyer and Bailey Zappi? I mean, me, personally, I would go with Bailey Zappi because he looked a little bit more dynamic. Sure, he had his mistakes, but I would say he would be a suitable fill-in until Mac Jones can return. But for this Lions defense, like, man, they really have a hard time shutting down opposing offenses, especially if they could score. They gotta get better in rushing the passer and tackling and covering. So I'm going with the Lions here because, like, while I do think the Patriots have a better defense, like the Lions, like, offense is the name of the game, and I do think they could score better than the Patriots currently can. But hell, if that Lions defense can't do anything to stop the Patriots offense from also scoring, they could run into trouble. The Seattle Seahawks take on the New Orleans Saints. The Seahawks are 2-2. New Orleans are 1-3. I keep forgetting to mention the current records for the teams I've already talked about by this point, but sorry about that. Still a little peeved about that Thursday night game. But anyway, speaking of the Seahawks, Geno Smith, looked poised. Surprisingly, more points than Russell Wilson did in that Thursday game. The Seahawks lit up the Lions before they had to keep matching them toe-to-toe for scores, keep extending their lead to hold them off in a shootout that would win 48-45. And, they had a scare as if they lost DK Metcalf to an injury, but no, he just had to go to the bathroom and take a number 2. I saw that, I was like, what the fuck? That was unusual. Meanwhile, for the New Orleans Saints, and Jameis Winston was a late scratch, so it was Andy Dolan to the rescue, the Red Rifle, that would lead the Saints offense, and yeah, it looked meh. But somehow they kept pace with the Minnesota Vikings, and then the game time field goal happened, and double doink. They did not get the London Ferry that they imagined, so they're 1-3, and now they're in a must-win situation against the Seahawks. Otherwise, they're going to be in the bottom of the barrel of the NFC South. So, I'm going to go with the Seahawks in this one. That Seahawks offense is starting to click. Geno Smith, looking pretty solid. Or maybe it's just the recent competition. And meanwhile for the Saints, it's not looking good. Even with Alvin Kamara, Michael Thomas, Chris Olave, it's the instability at quarterback. It's really holding them back. So give me the Seahawks in this one. Next up, we have the Miami Dolphins taking on the New York Jets. Dolphins at 3-1, the New York Jets at 2-2. The large story for the Dolphins right now is obviously Tua Tagovailoa's health. After he had his second concussion in 4 days from the Bills game and the Bengals game, he's not going to be available to play, and rightfully so against for this game upcoming against the Jets. So in comes in Teddy Bridgewater. So we're going to see how this Dolphins offense is going to be. Meanwhile, Zach Wilson made his return after suffering, I think it was like an ankle injury. I forgot what kind of injury it was, but it was like a lower leg injury. A little bit bumpy for the Jets, but a little promising and encouraging. And he managed to rally a comeback to beat the Steelers and Kenny Pickett 24-20. So for the Jets, this is kind of an opportunity for them to score an upset. So I'm going to roll with the Jets in this one and take it. So the Atlanta Falcons visit the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Both teams are 2-2. Winner of this game gets sole possession of first place in the NFC South after quarter point of the season. The Falcons defense did their job to pull out the win against the Cleveland Browns 23-20, despite an ugly day for Marcus Mariota. Meanwhile, even with the full complement of his weapons in the lineup, Tom Brady and the Tampa Bay Bucks just simply got outmatched by Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs in their Super Bowl matchup on Sunday Night Football as they lost that rematch. So the Bucks clearly struggling on offense right now, and the offensive line clearly weakened, and it's making Tom Brady rush the ball out and even causing him to make mistakes. And plus the injuries piling up at receiver, like 1 week Mike Evans or Chris Godwin will be out, and the next week they'll be back. It's causing a lot of confusion. And then for the Falcons, even though they lost Cordell Patterson for a couple weeks, you saw what they'll be like in that game against the Browns. Yeah, sure, they lost a key piece of their offense, but it wasn't nothing big yet until they face the Bucks. We'll see how that works out. So I do pick the Bucks to win this game against the Falcons. Perhaps they might steamroll them, but you can't necessarily sleep yet on Atlanta until we get to this game. The last game of the morning slate, the Tennessee Titans at 2-2 faced the Washington Commanders at 1-3. The Titans once again jumped out to this big lead, 24-3 specifically over the Indianapolis Colts. But once again, they had to hold on for dear life to maintain it. When they would beat them 24-17. Meanwhile, Carson Wentz literally had no command of this offense for Washington, nor his offensive line, because he was relentlessly sacked by the Dallas Cowboys and commanded many mistakes all the way to a bad loss. So the Titans, if they're going to jump out to this big lead each and every game, you better hope and pray that you assure that your opponents don't come back to it, because this is the third or fourth game that you jumped out to this big lead, and yet you allow your opponent to come back into it. They have to learn to close out games, or they have to allow to stretch the lead so much that they don't allow their opponent to come back. They have to learn to close out games better and faster. Meanwhile, for the Commanders, at some point, Carson Wentz continued struggles. It has to be like a wake-up call for Ron Rivera to put back in Taylor Heineke. I'm not saying Taylor Heineke is like a great quarterback, but what was the whole point of last season? I mean, he wasn't terrible last year, but again, he was a decent option for them. Like, well, I don't understand why they even made the trade for Carson Wentz in the first place. So I don't know. Either way, give me the Tennessee Titans in this one. All right, late afternoon action. We have my San Francisco 49ers at 2-2, taking on the Carolina Panthers at 1-3. The 49ers bounced back from an ugly primetime loss to the Broncos from week 3 with a bounce effort to hammer the Rams 24-9 to close out week 4. Meanwhile, Christian McCaffrey couldn't save the rest of what's going to turn out to be skid marks south as Baker Mayfield really struggled as the Panthers were downed by the Arizona Cardinals in week 4. So for the 49ers, I mean, they started a 2-game East Coast road trip. So is this going to be like an actual run to a playoff push down the stretch? Or is this just like a 1 week overreaction? We'll see. We'll see if it's like last year or if it's just a 1 week overreaction. And for Carolina, you know, like what's really going on? Like, is it Baker Mayfield struggling? Is he playing like he was in Cleveland? Is it Matt Rule coming up with really bad game plans? Both on especially on offense, or is it just both? Is just Matt Rule's a really bad coach, and Baker Mayfield's getting exposed as a really bad quarterback? So either way, give me the 49ers in this one. The Philadelphia Eagles at 4-0 take on the 2-2 Arizona Cardinals. The Eagles jumped out to this, or were down 0-14. They came back to beat the Jaguars 29-21. Meanwhile, Kyle Murray and James Conner ran roughshod in the second half to propel Arizona over the Panthers 26-16. The Eagles obviously have some resilience and different ways to win, even if Jalen Hurts doesn't score like 2 or 3 touchdowns per game. So they found ways to win through the running game last week against Jacksonville and their defense. Meanwhile, for Arizona, they again had a slow first half against Carolina, but they managed to have a stronger ending against a much weaker team. So, I mean, you go with Philadelphia in this one because, well, guess what's going to happen against with Arizona. So, yeah, expect unexpected. Next up, we have the Dallas Cowboys at 3-1 taking on the LA Rams at 2-2. The rush in Cooper's Cowboys continued to flow. The balanced attack of a relentless pass rush, good performance, surprisingly, from Cooper Rush, led to a 25-10 hammer of the Commanders. But for Matthew Stafford's LA Rams, nothing got going against the San Francisco 49ers, resulting in another L for the Rams on Monday night for the second straight year. Again, they allowed that to happen. So this is an opportunity for last year's NFC champions in the Dallas Cowboys to upset the defending Super Bowl champions in the LA Rams. And it's expected that Cooper Rush is going to start under center. But even then, you know, you have this like really good pass rush starting to come together. And then Cooper Rush, you know, did a manageable job. Throwing it to CeeDee Lamb, Michael Gallup last week. Granted, it was against the Washington Commanders, so let's see how he does against a slightly better defense with Aaron Donald, Jalen Ramsey, Leonard Floyd, Bobby Wagner. So let's see how he does against a better defense this week. Meanwhile, for the Rams, yeah, like if you thought that the 49ers pass rush was relentless, yeah, the Cowboys pass rush with Micah Parsons and DeMarcus Lawrence, yeah, they can be just as relentless too. Along with Trayvon Diggs at corner. Oh boy. Oh boy. So, yeah, like these injuries on the offensive line it's just continuing to pile up for the Rams. And with the Cowboys coming to town, it's not getting any better. So give me the Cowboys in this one. The Cincinnati Bengals and the Baltimore Ravens, both at 2-2, are your Sunday night matchup for this week. Joe Burrow and the offense regaining their footing, albeit slowly. They ripped the Fins out of the Dolphins 27-15 to open up week 3 on Thursday night last week. And for the division rival Ravens, choking another big lead. This time to the Bills as they lost that critical conference matchup 20-23. So the Cincinnati offense, like I said, slowly picking up steam, but that Ravens defense blowing 2 big leads, that defense is a real big concern. And John Harbaugh making that gutsy 4th down call at the goal line again. My God. So I'm going to go with the Bengals on this one. I mean, Joe Burrow and that offense slowly coming together again. And against that Ravens defense that's falling apart again. Yeah, recipe for disaster for Baltimore. The Monday Night Football game to close out week number 5, the Las Vegas Raiders at 1-3 take on the Kansas City Chiefs at 3-1. The Raiders got their first win of the season over the Broncos, riding the wave of Josh Jacobs, big rushing day, and Max Crosby's field day against Russell Wilson. So good for them, I guess. Meanwhile, the Chiefs avenged their Super Bowl 55 loss to the Bucs, scoring early and often on their way to a 41-31 victory. Don't let that score overlook you and fool you. For the Raiders, at least for that week, they seem to have found an even balance of Josh Jacobs in the running game and along with their passing attack. So seems like Josh McDaniels seems to have found his balance, even things out on the offense. So whether he can keep it up against the Chiefs this week, we'll see. Meanwhile, for the Chiefs, if you saw their basketball-happy offense against the Bucs, yeah, it looks real dangerous. Patrick Mahomes spreading the ball around to Travis Kelce, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Marcus Valdes-Scantling. Yeah, oh boy. If they continue to spread the ball around like that, man, they're going to look real dangerous in the AFC. So, oh boy. So give me the Chiefs in this game against the Raiders to close out the week. So those are my picks for week number 5. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you're with them or against them, or you're not really sure about them. So we'll be back. We'll be back in a few days after week number 5 is concluded to give you a recap of them once again. So this is DylanLasagna, a very cold lasagna, signing out. A very cold lasagna, and keep that lasagna very cold in the fridge. Your takes on the world of pro wrestling and sports. And until next time, peace out.